On the night of April 30th, 1999, in the glittering, pulsating heart of New Delhi, a single gunshot tore through the fabric of a high society party. It was a sound that ended the life of a 34-year-old model named Jessica Lal, but it was also a sound that would echo for years, becoming a battle cry for an entire nation. The act itself, a brazen murder committed in a room crowded with the city's elite, was shocking enough. But the identity of the alleged perpetrator, Siddharth Vashisht, known to all as Manu Sharma, the son of a powerful and immensely wealthy member of parliament, immediately set the stage for a monumental confrontation. This was not just a crime, it was a declaration, a test of whether justice in India could withstand the crushing weight of influence, power, and the kind of money that can buy almost anything. What followed was a torturous 7-year legal saga that would push the Indian criminal justice system to its breaking point. It was a journey that would redefine the power of the media and awaken the sleeping giant of civil society, forcing them to hold the powerful to account. The case began as a seemingly open and shut murder, witnessed by dozens of people. Yet it devolved into a shocking acquittal in 2006, a verdict that seemed to scream a cynical, deeply ingrained truth: that in India, the rich and the powerful operate under a different set of laws. A verdict that suggested a person's life had a price, and that the right amount of financial resource could erase even the most public of sins. This is the story of how the systemic subversion of justice, orchestrated through immense wealth and deep-seated political influence, was ultimately confronted and reversed by the unprecedented power of an activist media and an outraged citizenry. The journey from the infamous newspaper headline, "No one killed Jessica," a poignant cry of despair that captured a nation's collective anger, to the final, unequivocal conviction of Manu Sharma by the highest court in the land, is a story of profound societal and legal transformation. It's a story that exposed the deep, festering fault lines within the justice system, compromised witnesses, faltering investigations, and questionable judicial reasoning. But it also illuminated a path to accountability. It demonstrated that while the formal institutions of justice could be bent, they could not be irrevocably broken when faced with the combined force of public vigilance and media scrutiny. Stay with us as we dissect this complex, emotional, and landmark case. We will examine the crime, the collapse of the initial trial, the public and media intervention that forced a reckoning, the meticulous legal correction by the appellate courts, and the enduring legacy of a case that forever changed the relationship between the people, the press, and the judiciary in India. If you believe that justice should never be for sale, make sure you subscribe to True Crime Bharat and hit the notification bell, because this is a story every citizen needs to hear. The stage for this tragedy was the Tamarind Court restaurant, a stylish, exclusive establishment overlooking the historic Qutub Minar in Mehrauli, South Delhi. On the night of April 29th, leading into the early hours of April 30th, 1999, it was hosting one of its regular and very popular Thursday parties. The event, organized by the well-known fashion designer and socialite Bina Ramani, was a magnet for the city's elite, a swirling mix of fashion, business, and politics. For the evening, a group of models, including the vibrant and well-liked Jessica Lal, were acting as celebrity barmaids, adding a touch of glamour as they served drinks from an unlicensed bar set up on the premises. The party was in full swing, but the bar had its rules. It would serve liquor only until 12:30 a.m., and shortly after midnight, the stock had run out. The party continued, but the drinks had stopped flowing. At approximately 2 a.m., long after the bar had officially closed, a new group arrived. Siddharth Vashisht, universally known as Manu Sharma, walked in with 3 of his friends. He was the heir to a political and business dynasty, a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He strode to the bar and demanded a drink. To make his point, he flashed a significant sum of money, offering 1,000 rupees, a generous amount for a single drink at the time. Jessica Lal, who was managing the bar at that moment, politely but firmly refused his request. She explained the situation. The bar was closed, and there was simply no more liquor available. For most, this would be the end of the conversation. An annoyance perhaps, but nothing more. For Manu Sharma, however, this simple refusal was an intolerable affront to his ego, a challenge to his perceived status. His reaction was one of shocking and disproportionate aggression. He first produced a .22 caliber pistol. In a room full of people, he fired a single shot into the ceiling. It was a clear, terrifying act of intimidation, a violent gesture meant to bully and force compliance. But Jessica Lal did not back down. She stood her ground, repeating her refusal. Enraged by her defiance, Sharma then lowered his aim. He pointed the pistol directly at the unarmed 34-year-old woman who had dared to say no to him. He fired a second shot. This time, the bullet found its mark. It struck Jessica in the head, just above her left eye. The sound of the second gunshot plunged the party into chaos and horror. Jessica Lal collapsed, bleeding profusely. In the immediate, panicked aftermath, the party's host, Beena Ramani, courageously confronted Sharma. She demanded to know why he had shot Jessica and demanded he hand over his weapon. He refused, and in the confusion, he and his accomplices fled the scene, disappearing into the Delhi night. Jessica was rushed first to Ashlock Hospital and then transferred to the larger Apollo Hospital in a desperate attempt to save her life. But her injury was catastrophic. In the early hours of April 30th, 1999, doctors at Apollo Hospital declared her brought dead. A trivial dispute over a drink, a demand backed by a flash of cash, had escalated into a cold-blooded murder. This single brutal act set in motion a legal and social drama that would captivate, incense, and ultimately transform a nation for over a decade. From its very inception, the Jessica Lal case was defined by a staggering, almost unbelievable asymmetry of power. This imbalance wasn't merely a background detail, it was the central, driving force that shaped every single stage of the legal process, from the fumbled initial investigation to the first trial and the public inferno that followed. On one side was an ordinary middle-class family grieving an unimaginable loss. On the other, an empire of political power and immense fortune. Jessica Lal, born on January 5, 1965, was a 34-year-old model living and working in New Delhi. She was a familiar and beloved figure in the city's vibrant social and fashion circles. But beyond the tragic headlines, she was a daughter and a sister. Her younger sister, Sabrina Lal, would soon be thrust into the national spotlight, becoming the reluctant but resolute face of her family's long and agonizing fight for justice. Sabrina remembered her older sister, whom she affectionately called Shona, with deep love. Despite a 3-year age gap, their bond was profound. Sabrina fondly recalled how Jessica would care for her, telling her stories and singing her to sleep. She used to tell people, "I have 3 mothers now, Ma, Masi, and Shona." On that fateful night, Jessica had stopped by Sabrina's new office to wish her luck. She had even invited her to the party at Tamarind Court, but Sabrina had to decline due to work commitments, a small decision that would haunt her forever. The news of Jessica's death was a devastating blow, a seismic shock that plunged her family into a legal nightmare they could never have prepared for. For Sabrina, the motive was both infuriating and incomprehensible. She said, "My blood boiled. My sister's life was more valuable than a Rs-1000 or a glass of wine." The Lal family was now pitted against an adversary whose resources and influence seemed limitless. And at the other end of this spectrum was Siddharth Vashisht, Manu Sharma. To understand the trajectory of this case, one must first understand the world he came from. His political lineage was formidable. He was the son of Vinod Sharma, a titan in Indian politics. Vinod Sharma was a powerful and incredibly wealthy politician from the Indian National Congress Party, a serving member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha who had been elected multiple times to the Haryana state legislature. The family's connections ran deep into the heart of India's ruling establishment. Vinod Sharma was known to be close to former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and Manu Sharma's uncle was the son-in-law of a former President of India, Shankar Dayal Sharma. This wasn't just influence, it was a dynasty. Complementing this political power was an astonishing level of financial wealth. The Sharma family commanded a sprawling business conglomerate under the Piccadilly brand. Their assets were estimated to be worth over 1,000 crores, a staggering sum. Their empire included multiple sugar mills, a chain of hotels, and a cinema. This vast income stream gave them a level of financial invulnerability that few could comprehend. Manu Sharma wasn't just a passive beneficiary of this wealth, he was an active director at Piccadilly Agro Industries Limited. This potent cocktail of top-tier political connections and a seemingly bottomless well of money created an environment of extreme privilege and untouchable power, an environment that would become the central battlefield in the legal struggle ahead. The immense power wielded by the Sharma family was not just a backdrop to the crime. It was the very thing that enabled the impunity that defined the case's initial dark trajectory. The sheer brazenness of the murder, committed in public over a trivial refusal in front of dozens of witnesses, suggests a perpetrator acting with a profound, almost arrogant belief in his own immunity from any legal consequences. And as the events unfolded, this belief proved to be tragically well-founded. The direct pressure exerted on witnesses, as later recounted by Sabrina Lal, shows how this ecosystem of influence was actively deployed to obstruct justice from the very beginning. In a grotesque and chilling gesture, Manu Sharma's parents visited the Lal family home with a bouquet of flowers, a supposed act of sympathy. At the very same time, they were allegedly engaged in efforts to threaten and silence the key witnesses who could put their son behind bars. This nexus of power and capital was not just context, it was the primary weapon that allowed for the initial and nearly successful miscarriage of justice. The 7-year period between the filing of the charge sheet and the trial court's verdict was a slow-motion chronicle of systemic failure. What began with the promise of a swift resolution in a case with a room full of eyewitnesses slowly disintegrated into a masterclass in how to subvert a legal system. The investigation faltered, and the judicial process was systematically and cynically undermined, culminating in a verdict that defied not only public belief but legal logic itself. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, the initial police response showed some promise. Investigators moved relatively quickly. Within days, they located and recovered a crucial piece of evidence, Manu Sharma's abandoned black Tata Safari car, found in Noida. As public and media pressure mounted, Manu Sharma surrendered to the police in Chandigarh on May 6, 1999. Subsequently, 10 other co-accused were arrested. The Delhi police filed a formal charge sheet on August 3, 1999, officially naming Sharma as the main accused for murder, destruction of evidence, and criminal conspiracy. It seemed like the wheels of justice were turning as they should. However, this initial momentum quickly stalled. The investigation became beset by a series of troubling lapses and controversies that progressively weakened the prosecution's case. One of the most significant and damaging issues was the allegation that the crime scene at the Tamarind Court restaurant had been thoroughly cleaned up shortly after the incident. This act potentially destroyed vital forensic evidence, bloodstains, fingerprints, and other physical traces that could have definitively linked the accused to the crime. While charges for this destruction of evidence were not ultimately brought against the restaurant owner, Bina Ramani, the initial mishandling of the crime scene, cast a long, dark shadow over the integrity of the entire evidence collection process. It was the first of many red flags. Further complicating matters was the role or lack thereof of the lead investigating officer, Surinder Sharma. His handling of the case drew sharp criticism, and his deposition in court, a critical step in any trial, was inexplicably delayed for years. He only testified in July 2004 after returning from a United Nations assignment in Kosovo. This delay of several years created a vacuum of ambiguity and allowed defense narratives, however outlandish, to take root and fester. These investigative shortcomings, whether born of sheer incompetence or, as many suspected, deliberate action, created critical vulnerabilities in the prosecution's case. They were weaknesses that a well-funded and powerful defense team would later exploit with devastating and almost successful effect. The foundation of the case was being eroded, brick by brick, long before it ever reached a final judgment. The trial, which finally commenced in the Sessions Court, soon descended into a theater of the absurd, a judicial perversion driven primarily by a single corrosive phenomenon, the hostile witness. One by one, individuals who had initially given clear, confident statements to the police, identifying Manu Sharma as the killer, walked into court and recanted their testimonies. In total, a staggering 32 prosecution witnesses turned hostile, systematically gutting the case from within. This mass reversal of testimony wasn't just about minor characters. It included crucial eyewitnesses whose accounts were considered absolutely essential for securing a conviction. The very people who saw what happened were now claiming they saw nothing at all. The most damaging and infamous of these reversals came from Cheyenne Munshi. Munshi was a model who had been working alongside Jessica at the bar and was, in fact, the original complainant in the case. His initial statement to the police was so crucial that it formed the basis of the first information report, or FIR, the foundational document of the entire police case. In that statement, he had clearly and unequivocally identified Manu Sharma as the man who fired 2 shots. But when he took the witness stand in court on May 3, 2001, he told a completely different story. First, he failed to identify Sharma as the shooter. Then, in a move that drew widespread disbelief and derision, he attempted to invalidate his own original statement by claiming it had been recorded by the police in Hindi, a language he now professed not to understand. This claim was a blatant falsehood, a lie that would later be spectacularly exposed when it emerged that Munshi had subsequently acted in a Bollywood film, delivering his dialogues entirely in Hindi. But his most destructive contribution was the introduction of the two-gun theory. Contradicting his own initial report, Munshi now testified that there were 2 men at the bar counter. He claimed that while one man fired a shot into the air, it was a different, unidentified person who fired the second fatal shot at Jessica. This narrative was a deliberate and cynical fabrication, meticulously designed to do one thing: introduce reasonable doubt. It was a smokescreen intended to muddy the waters and provide a crucial escape route for the main accused. The trial court, in its final judgment, would shockingly lend credence to this theory, a decision that became a cornerstone of the flawed acquittal. Other key eyewitnesses like Karan Rajput and an electrician named Shiv Das also turned hostile, retracting their initial statements and claiming they had not seen the shooter. The wall of evidence was crumbling under the immense pressure of money and fear. In stark and courageous contrast to this parade of hostile witnesses, a few stood their ground. Beena Ramani, her daughter Malini Ramani, and her husband George Malehot consistently identified Manu Sharma in court. They provided crucial, unwavering testimony about the confrontation and the immediate aftermath of the shooting. However, in the face of the overwhelming number of reversals, their credible accounts were tragically not enough to salvage the prosecution's case in the trial court. Their truth was drowned out by a chorus of manufactured lies. On February 21, 2006, after 7 long and torturous years, Additional Sessions Judge S.L. Bhayana delivered a verdict that sent a seismic shockwave of disbelief and anger across the entire country. All 9 accused, including the man who dozens of people had seen pull the trigger, Manu Sharma, were acquitted of all charges. The judgment was a stunning, almost surreal conclusion to a case that had begun with what seemed like irrefutable evidence. The court's reasoning was a damning indictment of the prosecution and the police, yet it felt like a complete abdication of its own duty to find the truth. Judge Bhayana concluded that the Delhi police had simply failed to build a sustainable case against the accused. The primary grounds for this mass acquittal were threefold. First, the police's glaring inability to recover the murder weapon, the .22 caliber pistol used by Sharma. Second, the failure of forensic evidence to conclusively prove that the 2 empty cartridges recovered from the crime scene were fired from the same gun. And third, and most critically, the supposed unreliability of the prosecution's witnesses, so many of whom had turned hostile and contradicted their earlier statements. The judge essentially accepted the two-gun theory, a narrative floated by the defense and propped up by perjured testimony, as a plausible scenario. This created just enough doubt to warrant a full acquittal. The verdict was not met with quiet acceptance. It was met with a volcanic eruption of public outrage. For millions of ordinary Indians, this was not just a legal judgment, it was an egregious, insulting miscarriage of justice. It was a clear and painful sign that the legal system could be shamelessly manipulated by the wealthy and the influential, that a powerful family's assets were more valuable than a young woman's life. The day after the verdict, newspapers across India carried a headline that would become the anthem of a burgeoning protest movement, a phrase that perfectly encapsulated the absurdity and the tragedy of the situation. No one killed Jessica. A woman was murdered in plain sight, in a room full of people, and yet the Indian justice system had officially declared that no one was responsible. The acquittal was not the end of the story. It was the spark. It was the moment a nation's patience finally broke. It was the beginning of a firestorm of public anger that would set the stage for an unprecedented intervention by the media and civil society, an intervention that would demand and ultimately secure the justice that the court had failed to deliver. The fight for Jessica Lal was only just beginning. The system had failed. A murderer was set to walk free, and a family's grief was compounded by a profound sense of injustice. But the people of India were not ready to let this stand. The battle was about to move from the courtroom to the streets and the airwaves. If you're finding this story of a nation's fight for its conscience compelling, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps our channel, True Crime Bharat, bring more of these important cases to light. The fight for the truth was about to enter its most critical phase, and you won't want to miss what happened next. The 2006 acquittal in the Jessica Lal case did not lead to the cynical resignation that the powerful might have expected. Instead, it catalyzed a powerful and unprecedented wave of civic activism, a digital and physical uprising driven and amplified by a newly assertive and relentless media. This period marked a watershed moment for civil society in India. It was a demonstration of its raw power to challenge judicial outcomes and demand accountability from a state that seemed to have failed its citizens. The trial court's verdict unleashed a torrent of pent-up frustration, particularly among India's educated urban middle class. The case became a potent and painful symbol of a deeply flawed system, a system where justice was seemingly for sale, where your access to it depended entirely on your bank balance and your political connections. The sentiment that Jessica could have been anybody resonated deeply and widely, transforming a private, personal tragedy for the Lal family into a powerful public cause. As her sister Sabrina later reflected, "I think the trigger was that Jessica could have been anybody. Jessica had become India's daughter, and every Indian was fighting for her." The protest movement that erupted was creative, modern, and multifaceted, brilliantly blending new technology with traditional forms of civic action. The 24-hour news channels, in particular, played a pivotal role in galvanizing and focusing public opinion. The channel NDTV launched a groundbreaking SMS campaign, a simple but revolutionary idea at the time. They urged viewers to send text messages demanding a retrial. The response was overwhelming, a digital flood of anger and hope. The channel received over 200,000 messages in a matter of days, creating a massive, undeniable digital petition that the political establishment could not ignore. Newspapers, refusing to let the issue fade from public memory, relentlessly kept the story on their front pages, running bold headlines that questioned the verdict and shamed the system. This ferocious media campaign fueled a groundswell of citizen activism on the streets. Inspired by a powerful scene in the recently released and hugely popular Bollywood film Rang de Basanti, which depicted a candlelight vigil at New Delhi's iconic India Gate, students and citizens organized their own vigils for Jessica at the very same monument. These gatherings became powerful, poignant visual symbols of the movement, their flickering flames a quiet defiance against the darkness of injustice. On March 7, 2006, college students marched on Parliament Street, their chants of "Jessica, Jessica" echoing through the corridors of power. They held posters with messages that cut to the heart of the matter. "We are in a country where you can get away if your dad is a politician. The activism took on other creative forms. A cosmetics company distributed temporary tattoos that read, "Justice for Jessica." Citizens participated in T-shirt campaigns calling for a re-investigation. The movement even reached Manu Sharma's own hometown of Chandigarh. There, a group calling themselves the Middle Finger Protests organized silent demonstrations and vigils, braving an initial climate of public fear and alleged threats from Sharma's powerful family. The sheer scale, persistence, and volume of this public and media pressure began to have a tangible impact. The walls of power began to crack. Facing intense scrutiny and pressure from Central Congress party leaders, Manu Sharma's father, Vinod Sharma, was forced to resign from his powerful position in the Haryana cabinet. High-ranking officials, even the President of India, were compelled to publicly acknowledge the outcry and promise that action would be taken. The Delhi police, now under immense pressure to rectify their earlier failures, filed an appeal in the High Court against the acquittal. The people had spoken, and their voice was too loud to ignore. While the public protests and media campaigns created an environment of intense, suffocating scrutiny, it was a single explosive piece of investigative journalism that delivered the decisive blow to the crumbling narrative of the first trial. On September 9, 2006, the news magazine Tehelka, already famous for its daring sting operations, aired an exposé on the television channel Star News that would change the course of the case forever. The sting operation, conducted with hidden cameras over a period of months, provided damning, irrefutable visual evidence of what the public had long suspected. Key witnesses in the Jessica Lal case had been bribed and coerced into changing their testimonies. The broadcast showed individuals directly involved in the case admitting on camera to these criminal manipulations. They spoke of the immense pressure and, most importantly, the huge sums of money that had been paid to ensure silence or, worse, to encourage perjury. Most significantly, the exposé explicitly named Vinod Sharma, Manu Sharma's powerful father, as one of the individuals who had paid this cash to witnesses to secure their cooperation. The airing of the Tehelka sting was a pivotal, game-changing moment. It transformed the public's strong suspicion of foul play into a near certainty, now backed by credible recorded evidence. The public protests had created the fertile ground, the immense pressure that made the risks of such an operation worthwhile for a media outlet like Tehelka. In turn, the sting's shocking revelations vindicated the public's anger and provided the smoking gun evidence of systemic corruption that the judiciary could no longer afford to overlook. The public outrage and the investigative journalism were not parallel tracks. They formed a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop. The protests created the demand for truth, and the sting operation supplied the proof, each amplifying the other's impact. This synergy directly and completely undermined the entire foundation of the trial court's acquittal, which had rested on the supposed unreliability of the witnesses. It was now terrifyingly clear that this unreliability was not a matter of faulty memory or confusion. It was a matter of deliberate, financially induced criminal perjury. The sting operation gave the prosecution and the appellate courts an undeniable and publicly validated basis to re-examine the entire case from a new, chilling perspective, one in which the witnesses hadn't just been unreliable, they had been bought. The combination of sustained, deafening public pressure and the damning revelations of the Tehelka sting operation compelled the judicial system to act, and to act swiftly. The appeal process, first in the Delhi High Court and then in the Supreme Court, represented a period of profound institutional self-correction. It was a time when the flawed, perverse logic of the trial court was systematically dismantled, and justice was, finally, reclaimed. In an unusual and remarkably swift response to the public outcry, the Delhi police filed their appeal, and the Delhi High Court took up the case on a fast-track basis. The proceedings were conducted with a speed that was almost unheard of in the Indian legal system. Daily hearings were held over a period of just 25 days. On December 18, 2006, the High Court delivered a landmark judgment that not only reversed the trial court's verdict, but also served as a scathing, surgical indictment of its reasoning. The High Court bench, launched a systematic demolition of the trial court's judgment, leveling sharp, unambiguous criticism at the trial judge S.L. Payana. The appellate judges described the lower court's reasoning as the product of a total lack of application of mind, an immature assessment of material, and a hasty approach towards securing a particular end, namely the acquittal. This was an extraordinary and brutal rebuke. It suggested that the trial court's decision was not just a simple error in judgment, but a perverse and willful misreading of the evidence, a deliberate journey towards a predetermined conclusion. The core of the High Court's judgment was a meticulous, painstaking re-evaluation of the evidence that the trial court had either dismissed, ignored, or fundamentally misinterpreted. They rebuilt the case piece by piece. They reinstated the credibility of key prosecution witnesses whom the trial court had inexplicably cast aside. The testimonies of Beena Ramani, her daughter Malini Ramani, and their guest Deepak Bhojwani were deemed reliable, consistent, and crucial. The High Court found the trial court's dismissal of their evidence to be a grave miscarriage of justice and a complete misreading of their clear statements. Next, the High Court unequivocally rejected the two-gun theory that had been the linchpin of the defense and the trial court's acquittal. It labeled the theory a concoction and described the testimony of the hostile witness Cheyenne Munshi as a somersault and a complete lie. The court found his excuse about not understanding Hindi to be entirely unconvincing and dishonest. With the credible witnesses reinstated and the false narratives dismissed, the High Court constructed a robust, unbreakable case based on a clear chain of circumstantial evidence. This chain included Manu Sharma's confirmed presence at the party, his ownership of a licensed .22 caliber pistol, which he conveniently failed to produce for investigation, the recovery of his abandoned Tata Safari, from which a live .22 cartridge matching the type used in the murder was found, and his subsequent conduct, which included absconding for days after the crime and refusing to participate in a test identification parade. The court drew a strong adverse inference from his failure to explain the whereabouts of his licensed weapon and his flight from the law. Based on this rigorous and clear-eyed re-examination, the Delhi High Court found the evidence against Manu Sharma to be overwhelming and conclusive. On December 20, 2006, it sentenced him to life imprisonment for the murder of Jessica Lal. Two of his co-accused, Vikas Yadav and Amardeep Singh Gill, were convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison for their role in destroying evidence. Justice had been delayed, but the High Court's decisive, courageous intervention ensured it was not ultimately denied. Following his conviction by the Delhi High Court, Manu Sharma exercised his right to appeal to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of India. His legal team, led by the eminent, formidable, and notoriously expensive senior advocate Ram Jethmalani, mounted a robust and aggressive challenge to the High Court's verdict. The central pillar of the defense's argument in the Supreme Court was the contention that Manu Sharma had been a victim of a trial by media. Jethmalani argued forcefully that the relentless, overwhelmingly negative media coverage had created a climate of intense prejudice that made a fair hearing impossible. He claimed that the media had prejudged the issue, vilified his client, and exerted undue pressure on the judiciary, effectively rendering the High Court's verdict a foregone conclusion driven by public sentiment rather than cold, hard legal fact. In a separate and somewhat desperate line of argument, Jethmalani also attempted to cast doubt on the motive, suggesting that Jessica Lal was not killed for refusing a drink, but for some other reason, an unsubstantiated and inflammatory claim that he had also unsuccessfully made in the High Court. The prosecution, represented by the then Solicitor General Gopal Subramaniam, countered these arguments with calm precision. They maintained that the High Court's conviction was based on a solid foundation of credible evidence and sound legal reasoning. The prosecution argued that there was more than sufficient direct and circumstantial evidence to prove Sharma's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt, and that the High Court had simply performed its appellate duty by correctly and diligently analyzing this evidence, a task which the trial court had so spectacularly failed to do. On April 19, 2010, a Supreme Court bench comprising Justices P. Sathasivam and Swatantra Kumar delivered the final definitive verdict, bringing the decade-long legal battle to a close. The court upheld the Delhi High Court's conviction and affirmed the sentence of life imprisonment for Manu Sharma. In its detailed 229-page judgment, the Supreme Court meticulously addressed the trial by media argument. It acknowledged the intense media scrutiny the case had received, stating that it was unfortunate that the trial by media did, though to a very limited extent, affect the accused. However, the court drew a critical and crucial distinction between media pressure and judicial decision-making. It concluded that the media coverage was not tantamount to a prejudice which could weigh with the court in taking any different view. The judgment firmly stated that the High Court had analyzed all the evidence and arrived at the correct conclusion based on the merits of the case, independent of the media narrative. The Supreme Court found that the prosecution had proven Sharma's guilt beyond any doubt, citing his lies under oath, his failure to explain the disappearance of the murder weapon, and the clear evidence linking him to the car used to flee the scene. This verdict was a masterful judicial balancing act. It implicitly validated the outcome that the media and the public had fought so hard for, while simultaneously reasserting the primacy of the judiciary and the sacred principles of due process. By conceding the existence of a trial by media, but finding that it did not taint the legal reasoning of the High Court, the Supreme Court performed a crucial act of institutional self-correction. It overturned a deeply flawed trial court verdict while setting a clear precedent. Media campaigns can shine a powerful light on injustice and demand accountability, but they cannot substitute for legal evidence and rigorous judicial scrutiny. The final verdict, the court signaled, must always be written by the hand of the law. The Supreme Court's verdict in 2010 marked the end of the legal battle, but the reverberations of the Jessica Lal case continued to be felt for another decade. The story's final chapters involve the convict's life in prison, a series of controversial releases, and a final, poignant act of forgiveness that brought a measure of peace to a story defined by struggle. Manu Sharma's incarceration at the infamous Tihar jail was punctuated by a series of controversial paroles that repeatedly brought his case and the question of his privilege back into the public spotlight. In September 2009, he was granted a 30-day parole, ostensibly to attend to his ailing mother and to deal with his family's business matters. This decision, granted despite police objections, erupted into a major controversy when media reports, complete with photographs, showed Sharma partying in Delhi nightclubs, a flagrant, arrogant violation of his parole conditions. The public uproar was immediate and intense. The government, embarrassed and under pressure, was forced to cancel his parole, and he was ordered back to jail early. Subsequent paroles for attending his brother's wedding or for academic examinations were granted under much stricter conditions, a direct result of the heightened public scrutiny. In 2018, on account of what was officially termed good conduct, Sharma was transferred to an open jail, a semi-release facility that allowed him to work outside the prison during the day and return in the evening. The final chapter of his imprisonment came on June 2, 2020. The Delhi Lieutenant Governor approved his premature release, following a recommendation from the Sentence Review Board. Having served approximately 17 years of his life sentence, Manu Sharma, the man who killed Jessica Lal over a drink, walked free. A remarkable and deeply moving element of this final phase was the journey of Jessica's sister, Sabrina Lal. After 2 decades of a relentless, soul-crushing struggle for justice, she found a way to move forward. In 2018, she wrote a letter to the Tihar jail authorities with a statement that stunned many. She said that she had forgiven her sister's killer and had no objection to his release. She explained her position with grace and quiet strength, saying, "I truly believe he has been doing good work in jail. It's a load off my chest, and I feel at peace with myself." For Sabrina, who had become a national symbol of perseverance and courage, the conviction had brought the closure she needed. Forgiveness was the final personal step in letting go of the immense burden she had carried for so long. Having finally seen justice done for her sister, Sabrina Lal passed away from a prolonged illness in August 2021, her fight finally over. The Jessica Lal murder case left an indelible, permanent mark on India's legal and cultural landscape. Its impact extended far beyond the conviction of one powerful individual. It catalyzed significant, long-overdue debates and reforms that continue to shape the country today. Perhaps the most significant legacy of the case was the harsh, unavoidable spotlight it shone on the desperate need for a robust witness protection program in India. The trial court's acquittal was a direct, undeniable result of the blatant intimidation and bribery of witnesses, a systemic cancer that the case laid bare for the entire nation to see. The spectacle of 32 witnesses turning hostile sparked a national debate on how to protect those who come forward to testify against powerful individuals with deep pockets and long arms. This public and political pressure was a direct catalyst for legislative discussions and law commission reports that eventually culminated in a landmark reform. In 2018, the Supreme Court of India established a comprehensive, nationwide witness protection scheme, a direct legacy of this case, aimed at preventing the kind of subversion of justice that almost allowed a murderer to walk free. Furthermore, the case set a powerful and rare precedent for holding hostile witnesses accountable for their lies. In a groundbreaking decision on May 22, 2013, the Delhi High Court ordered that criminal proceedings for perjury be initiated against two of the most critical hostile witnesses, the actor Shan Munshi and a ballistic expert, P.S. Manocha. Munshi, the original complainant, was prosecuted for lying under oath about his knowledge of Hindi and for inventing the two-gun theory that nearly derailed the entire case. This was a significant step, sending a strong signal that misleading a court of law would have serious consequences, serving as a potential deterrent against the kind of witness tampering that had plagued so many high-profile trials. The cultural impact of the case was equally profound. The story was immortalized in the 2011 blockbuster film No One Killed Jessica. Starring acclaimed actresses Vidya Balan as Sabrina Lal and Rani Mukherjee as a composite journalist character, the film dramatized the events for a new generation, cementing the case's status as a cultural touchstone. The movie successfully captured the raw emotion of Sabrina's struggle and the media's crucial, game-changing role, ensuring that the lessons of the case would not be forgotten. Moreover, the public protests themselves created a new template for civic engagement in modern India. The candlelight vigils at India Gate, famously inspired by the film Rang de Basanti, created a phenomenon that scholars have termed flash activism. It demonstrated the powerful new ability of popular culture, particularly cinema, to mobilize urban youth and translate on-screen narratives into real-world civic action. The Jessica Lal case proved that a film, an SMS campaign, or a simple, powerful headline could become a potent tool for social change, reshaping the dynamics of public protest in the 21st century. The Jessica Lal murder case is more than just a true crime story. It is a powerful, multi-layered narrative about the fragility and the ultimate resilience of justice in a modern democracy. It illustrates a near-total systemic collapse where police investigation faltered, witnesses were compromised by power and money, and a trial court failed in its most fundamental duty to ascertain the truth. But this was followed by a remarkable resurrection of justice, driven not by the system's own internal mechanisms, but by the moral outrage of the public and the relentless, unwavering scrutiny of the media. The case stands as an enduring testament to the power of the Fourth Estate and an engaged civil society as essential checks on the formal institutions of government, particularly when those institutions are in danger of being subverted by wealth and influence. It is a chronicle of how a nation, through collective action, refused to accept a cynical verdict and fought to restore the sacred principle that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, is above the law. The lessons learned from this two-decade saga offer a clear blueprint for strengthening the Indian criminal justice system. The fight for witness protection, for accountability against perjury, and for a judiciary that remains independent from the pressures of wealth and public opinion continues today. The echoes of Jessica's case are a constant reminder of both the system's vulnerabilities and the people's power to demand and secure justice. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the media's role was justified, or did it cross a line into a trial by media? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective is a valuable part of this conversation. Thank you for joining us on True Crime Bharat. If you found this deep dive informative and important, please hit the subscribe button and share this video. It helps us continue to explore the cases that have truly defined the Indian criminal justice system. We'll see you in the next one.